put your request in the chat, and I'll send you the recording. And we'll also send a post-session survey, if you'd please fill that in, and also then we'll include the presentation that you're going to see. So you will get that afterwards. You don't have to go do screenshots as we're going through this. All right. Okay, so I've got my eye on the chat, and I should be able to see most of your videos here. So if you've got questions, like I said, please feel free to post them in the chat, or raise your hand. Okay, but I've got two screens, so the chat and your video feeds are on the one screen, and I'm looking at the presentation on the other screen. Okay, so PoPIA. So this presentation is just supposed to just be a high-touch, high-level concept of what is going on in PoPIA, so that you can get an idea. It's legal. I try and make it exciting. We've really distilled it down to what matters, but it is still a little bit to get through. So let's get through it. We should be around past. We should be through it, and then we will talk about the solutions to the problems that we're going to pick up. Okay, so got to get through this first section, and then we can talk about the solutions. So bear with me as we go through this first section about the legislation. So just a little bit about PoPIA's process. We are a consulting firm, and we have our own process in dealing with PoPIA and helping our clients to achieve compliance. You just remember that compliance is your responsibility. We can't get you compliant. You've got to get yourself compliant. We can guide you along the way, but the responsibility and accountability for it resides with you. So this is our process. We do a gap analysis and orientation to begin with. Then we start setting up software, which really makes a part of your company DNA. And then we capture high-risk processes. That's sort of like an impact assessment and a risk identification methodology. So you can see where PoPIA is touching your business, where your risks are, and then we can sort out the software to deal with those risks and manage those risks for you. And that's ultimately what the regulator wants to see. Have you identified your risks, and what are you doing about it? So the software helps you with the how and the what are you doing, and the process mapping that we do is your risk identification. So that's a high level of our process. So PoPIA is about privacy of personal information, and you need to comply when you're processing personal information. And that processing needs to be responsible, fair, and secure. So those are broadly the principles. Whenever you're dealing with personal information, the question is, are you processing it? So if I've got a piece of personal information that's just sitting doing absolutely nothing somewhere, it doesn't necessarily mean I have to comply with PoPIA. The moment I do something with that personal information, I need to be compliant. And then what I do, I must be responsible in the way I do it. I can't just go dishing it out to everyone. I can't leave it lying around everywhere. And I must be fair to the person who's given me their personal information. So I can't go market to them or let things be done with their personal information that they wouldn't have wanted to be done. So who does PoPIA apply to? Well, it applies to all organizations, big, small, private, public, everyone has to be compliant with PoPIA. Okay, and then how did we get to where we are now? So it started in 2009, the concept. Eventually, it got enacted in 2013, and then it became effective in 2020. So PoPIA is actually already effective. All of this stuff about the 30th of June 2021 is that the regulator is then going to enforce the law. So you then have to be compliant because the regulator's already given you a whole year since the act became effective before they're going to start policing it, so to speak, before they're going to start doing inspections. So you've really had a year since it became effective to get your house in order, but actually since 2013, because that's when it was enacted and that's when we were supposed to start becoming compliant. So we've really had a very long time. And the issue is that the regulators self-funded, and that means they have to raise their own funds. Now, how are they going to raise funds? They've got to fine entities to be able to raise funds. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on the 1st of July. Then what is personal information? Well, the Act describes 48 data elements, and you can see all 48 here on the screen. It's actually extremely broad, what is considered personal information. It's not just name, number, email address, and ID number. It's a whole lot of other stuff. Mental health, physical health, well-being, disability, religion, a location information, like your location pin that you often share on WhatsApp, that's personal information. An online identifier, so when you go onto a website and there's a tracking cookie, that tracking cookie gives you an online identifier. That online identifier is personal information. Personal preferences, correspondence of a private nature, all of these things are personal information. So it's quite far-reaching. And whose personal information does PoPIA include? Well, again, it's everybody. It is your outsourced partners, contractors, public and private institutions, employees, clients, and customers. So just about every facet of your business is guaranteed to be touched by PoPIA. Okay, now, when I started, I said PoPIA is about processing of personal information. So what is this concept of processing? And here we can see what processing encompasses. This is actually 3 slides. This is the first one. So it's about collecting. So if you're collecting, you're processing. If you're receiving, so collecting, you're undertaking an action, initiating action to get it. Receiving, it's coming to you. You're not asking actively trying to get the information. It's a passive. Recording. So obviously another information you collected or received, you go record it. Organizing, just organizing, that's processing. Collating, storing, updating, modifying, and it continues. Retrieving, altering, disseminating, distributing, consulting, using, and it carries on still further. Merging, linking, erasing, and even destroying personal information is considered processing. So if you're doing any of those things, and you most surely are doing some of those things, if not all of them, then you are processing personal information. And in every action that was there, you need to be responsible and fair and secure in those actions of processing personal information. Okay, now we get to the heart of what is PoPIA about. There's 8 conditions. When you process personal information, there's 8 conditions you need to comply with. And herein lie the difficulties of dealing with PoPIA, these 8 conditions. The first one is accountability. So with that, the responsible party, that's a term from the Act, and the responsible party is essentially you. You are the responsible party. You're processing personal information in your company, so your company is the responsible party. Okay, so the responsible party must make sure that there is accountability or responsibility within the organization for the personal information being processed, both by the employees and your operators. So an operator is a company that you choose to use to process personal information. For example, a courier company, if you're giving a delivery address, person that it must be delivered to, and contact details, you are giving personal information to your courier company. They're then an operator of yours. So you, as the responsible party, your company, must make sure that your employees act responsibly and your operators, external parties that work for you. So how do you make that happen? How do you make sure that you've given them some information, that they've read and understood it, and that they're going to use that information appropriately? As in, do you need a contract? Is there a policy you need for your employees? What are those things that you need to do? So we'll come to those solutions, but that's the problem of accountability. I need to prove that I've educated, that it's been understood, and then I can say these people are responsible for their actions, and accountability then can reside within my organization. Okay, so as a little joke, we need to know who's supposed to be doing what in our organization. If we don't, then we're going to sit with an accountability problem like this. Next one is processing limitation. So processing limitation is saying that you only collect what's required. You only do what is necessary with what you've collected, and that you have consent for what you've collected, and that consent was obtained from the person from who you're collecting the information. So you can't go to somebody else and say, please, can I get consent to collect so-and-so's information? No. You need to go to so-and-so and ask them for consent. Then what you collect needs to only be what's required. So I can't go and collect your bank details and password and username for your bank account in order to capture you for an emailing campaign if you want to subscribe to a newsletter. That makes no sense. The bare minimum that I need is your email address. Possibly I can justify your name and surname together with your email address. So am I collecting the bare minimum that I need to do what I want to do? So that's essentially what the processing limitations about. And obviously the first point there, that I then, if I collected your email address to send you a newsletter, I cannot send you coupons and discount vouchers and marketing material of other natures. I need to send you a newsletter because that's what I got permission for. Okay, so here we can see all too familiar scene. You're filling out a loan application, and I don't know that all of that information is required. So is that meeting the processing limitation? Probably not. So banks have recently refined what they require, and they don't ask so many questions anymore. Then purpose specification. So purpose specification is that you collect, it's similar to the processing limitation, but it's taking the purpose aspect and expanding on it. So purpose specification, again, I only use it for the specified purpose. I then need to disclose how long am I going to retain it for, and only retain it for that period, and then destroy it in a responsible, safe, and secure manner. So do you have a retention and destruction policy in place? Do you have a system in place to make sure that you are processing within the limitations of the consent that you obtained? Do you know what consent you have obtained? Do you have a system that's going to help you do that? So purpose specification, we do not need a social insurance number just to sell a hot dog. So that piece of personal information, the social insurance number, is not related to the purpose for which personal information is required. In fact, no personal information is required. Further processing limitation. Okay, so we're halfway there, almost done. Further processing limitation is now saying, once you have personal information, so once I've got your email address to send you a newsletter, or as an employee, I've got your bank details to make a payment to you every month, then I cannot go and do further things with that personal information. That's the extent, that's the permission I got. That was the original purpose, and therein remains my lawful basis of what I can do. I can now not take that email address and give it to another agency and say, here's email addresses for you. You can market to them. Or within my own organization, I cannot go and do that. I've got the permission to send you a newsletter. I cannot go and send you something else, marketing material. I also, in the example of employees, if I got your bank details to pay you, I cannot go and sign you up for debit orders. I don't have permission to go and do that. So the further processing limitation is saying you've got personal information for a reason, and that's what you can use it for. You cannot go and use it for other things just because you've got it. You need further consent to do that. Right. And here has a great example. You go and enter your information on a travel's website, and then suddenly it's all over the world, and you're getting marketing material from Turkey and USA and Japan and all over the place. And all you did was enter your details in to book a holiday in Drakensberg. Then the fifth one is information quality. Okay, so what we're not doing here, sorry, just go back. Further processing limitation. So again, in my organization, have I looked at my company processes? So do I know personal information comes in here? What am I going to use it for originally? Did I get consent for that? Then I do something else with the personal information. Have I got consent for that? And so on. So look at your company processes and see where are the touch points in your company process of personal information. Then information quality. Do you have a system in place to, on a regular basis, make sure that the information you have is accurate? So someone's address has changed. How do they communicate that with you? Do you proactively ensure that you've got the right, say, address details? Do you proactively ensure that you've got the surname spelled right, so on? So if you're dealing with the Consumer Protection Act, and you have, because that's also got data quality requirements there, and you have processes in place, you can leverage those processes. Otherwise, it's a capability you need to look for in your organization to make sure that personal information is accurate. Remember, personal information is not just your customers, it's your employees, your contractors, other public and private bodies, as well as your clients and customers. So I'm sure we've all experienced something like this. I certainly have. Getting a phone call or an email and you've, what the heck? This isn't me. Why on earth are you contacting me? I get frequent phone calls because I think my cell phone number belonged to somebody else sometime in the past. And I'm asked, is this Dorothy? Who on earth is Dorothy? So it's important. The Act now requires you have to have accurate information. Then we have openness. So openness is two aspects to it. One is in terms of the regulator and one is in terms of a data subject. So I need to, when I'm collecting personal information, need to be open to the person I'm collecting it from. And I need to tell them, what am I using it for? Why do I need it? How long am I going to need it for? And I need to do this at the point of collection, not after the fact. When I collect it, I need to communicate these things. So I need to be open and transparent. What am I going to do with your personal information? Otherwise, you cannot say that consent has been obtained. So do you know, again, look at your processes. Do you know everything you're going to do with personal information? And up front, you need to communicate that. Are you doing that? Do you have a system in place that helps you identify what you're doing? And as your business changes, can you dynamically advise a new data subject? Because my business has changed, automatically the changes are now being advised to that data subject. That's the difficulty. The other aspect is the regulator. So if you have a breach, you got to notify the regulator of the breach. So do you have a system in place that allows you to assess the breach? What has happened? Who's been impacted? What's the extent? What are we doing to mitigate it? And communicate all of that to the regulator. The regulator does spell out what it is that you're supposed to be communicating to them in the event of a breach. Okay. Then security and safeguards. So security and safeguards, basically the act is mandating that you need to look after personal information. You've got to think of it now like a diamond. Personal information is a diamond. Would you just leave a diamond lying open on your desk in the middle of your office for anyone to come and pick up? But yet we leave application forms on our desks for anyone to come by and see whose name is on that application form, or to take the application form and go do something with it. So we need to look at personal information as an asset, but a valuable asset that we need to protect. So it's no longer just data that can float around our company. We need to think of it as an asset that has to be protected. We've got to secure it, put security measures in place, physical and electronic. Physical, if you're dealing with hard copy stuff, you need to have physical controls in place. Have a clean desk policy. At the end of the day, make sure everyone takes whatever's on their desk, put it in a drawer and lock the drawer. It makes your work life easier. Your brain's going to be more focused because you're going to know where your stuff is, because you can't just go smash everything together that's on your desk and chuck it in a drawer. You're going to have to organize your stuff a bit better. So when you put it in the drawer, it's easy the next day to take it out and carry on where you were. Also, it's going to force you to work with what you need to work with. You're not going to have 3-month-old stuff on your desk that you're not working with at the moment. If you're not working with it right now, file it away. So a clean desk policy is probably also a good practice just to be more efficient and more organized in your organization. That's in terms of physical safeguards. You can do something as simple as a clean desk policy. You can go to much greater lengths. Access control, biometric access control. It depends on what are the risks in your business. And that's where it starts. Have you identified the risks? And what are you doing to deal with those risks? Are you mitigating them? So yeah, you might not have a high level of risk in terms of the physical personal information, but maybe you're dealing with information of politicians, and it's very sensitive information. That stuff that can't lie around on people's desks. So you have to go to much further degree to protect that piece of paper, where if you're just dealing with a list of names and surnames, and there's nothing else attached to those names and surnames, that's not highly, wouldn't say confidential, but highly important personal information. So I just want to see if anyone's in the waiting room here. No? Okay. Okay, so that's on the security safeguards. So what you're seeing there, you don't have to go do that. Okay, that's not what the Act is asking you to do. You need to be reasonable in the safeguards that you implement. And the last one is data subject participation. This one's actually quite difficult to achieve. There's a specific form that you need to have. It must be available physically and electronically, and people must be able to access that, that form to be able to ask you or request from you, what personal information do you have of me? Then they're allowed to object to you having that. They're allowed to ask you to delete that information or to alter it because it might be wrong, correct it, for example. Now, what's very important, sorry, it seems like someone's having an issue here. Let me just quickly. Apologies for that. Someone just struggling to get in. Just sent him some information. All right. Tanya, I see you here. Could you maybe just send Michelle the invite? She wanted to join.
Yes, I'll do that quickly.
Thank you. Okay, so we need a form where we can allow people to request what information we have, to correct it, to object to it, and so on. Also, we then need to report that to the regulators. So how many requests did we get in the year? What did we refuse? What didn't we refuse? And so on. Okay, so those are the 8 conditions. Now, before I go on to the next step, I want to just calm everyone down. If you're like feeling, what the hell? How am I supposed to do all of this? You know, I've got laws that I've got to comply with. I have to have my employees' ID numbers to submit their EMP 201s and get their tax numbers. I have to have their tax numbers. That's personal information. I've got to have these things. There's laws. I've got to comply with FICA. I'm an insurance broker, and FICA says I've got to have certain stuff. So remember that PoPIA is subservient, if I could say that. It's subservient to any other law. So if there's a law you need to comply with, then you comply with that law. So that law requires you to have personal information, then you have to have personal information because that's your lawful basis. And if someone now says, oh, I don't want to give that personal information to you, well, then you're not compliant, and then you cannot deal with that person as a customer. They cannot be your customer or supplier or whatever the situation might be. So if other laws take precedence over PoPIA, just remember that. Next, a beautiful trick. Our personal information is available on the internet, and so magicians can have access to it and make it look like they know everything. I don't know. Okay, I just prepared this slide so that you can get an idea from the information officer's perspective what it is that as an information officer you need to see in your organization. So the information officer is the CEO or managing director. It's the most senior person in the organization. That has to be the information officer. Has to be C-suite or director level person. So in a sole proprietor business, you are the information officer. If you're 2 people and you're co-shareholders, one of you is going to be the information officer if you're on an equal basis. If one of you is more actively involved in management and the others less, then the one more involved in management is the information officer. So large to small, everyone needs to have an information officer. Now, the information officer is the person that can be put in prison for up to 10 years, believe it or not. Pretty crazy jail sentence if you're non-compliant. So the information officer needs to make sure that there's a framework in place to manage your compliance. So that means it's not a once-off, get a bunch of templates and we're sorted. You've got to have a framework that maintains compliance. So it's a monthly, quarterly, annual thing you need to do to ensure you're compliant. You need to constantly monitor compliance, number one. So don't for a moment think that you can do this once off, and if something happens, the regulator is going to say, oh, 4 years ago you were compliant, it's okay. You need to be actively every so often, say quarterly, be monitoring, doing something to show that you're monitoring compliance in your organization. You need to do an assessment. So that's that risk aspect. Are you looking at your business from a risk perspective and putting controls in place to deal with the risks that you're exposed to reasonably? You don't have to go and have a shark tank with crocodiles and guard dogs and security cameras to protect 2 names. And they're just names. They don't even have surnames on them. Okay, then you need to ensure that a PoPIA manual is maintained. PoPIA is the Promotion of Access to Information Act that came out quite a few years before PoPIA. So PoPIA requires that you have a PoPIA manual. Then you need to have training for your information and deputy information officers. So they need to be well versed and have a good understanding of PoPIA. The information officer has to have a good understanding of PoPIA. In terms of all of your other staff, you need to have awareness training. How does PoPIA impact on their work practices? What is PoPIA about? Sort of what I've done now. It's still a bit light, but it's getting to what you need to communicate to staff. What the information office and deputy information office needs a lot more detailed. And then you need to have policies in place to deal with these 8 conditions that we've just discussed. And then in terms of the data subject access request, just want to point out that you can refuse a request. You can refuse data subject access requests. If you give requests to the data subject, if there is a data subject access request, you have to give assistance. So even if you ultimately refuse it, you have to help them. And you need to have internal measures in place to deal with that. And remember, you have 30 days to finalize the subject access request. If you don't, they can report you to the regulator, and then the regulators can come inspect you, and they're hungry for fines. So what are we reporting to the regulator on an annual basis? The number of requests received, the number of requests granted in full, granted per section 46, the number refused, number of appeals lodged, so where you've refused a request and it's been appealed, the number of appeals granted, and if on appeal you did not grant and it went to court, the number of court applications. So that you've got to report to the regulator. Okay, so that's basically PoPIA. Hopefully it's no longer in the clouds, but within reach, and you can understand it. And remember to dance like no one's watching, but text, post, and email like it will be read in court one day. Okay, so that concludes our presentation. Are there any questions that have arisen so far? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your questions. Alternatively, you can post them in the chat if we do have any questions. While we're waiting, I'm going to quickly log into a software application, and we can have a look at how that software is going to sort out these 8 conditions for us. Just working with 2-factor authentication, so just putting in additional security. Okay, it's logging in, and then we're just going into our demo environment. All right, so now for the software. So now we know we've got these 8 conditions we've got to comply with. How are we going to comply with them? So this is not software we've designed. We've looked and found what we feel is a good software solution that helps you with that framework. If we just jump back to the PowerPoint presentation, we had this framework that we have to develop, implement, and monitor information officers. So that framework, remember, ongoing thing. So the software helps us on an ongoing basis to be compliant and to prove compliance. But here's an awesome thing about the software. You can use it for other compliance-related things in your business. So if you've got FICA tasks that you need to do on a regular basis, or because of your involvement in the insurance industry, or if there's certain reporting that you need to do and you want to be reminded, this is a task-based system, and you can create custom tasks to remind you or the relevant person that you want to assign to the task to do the work. Okay, so it's a task-based system. It also maps all of your data. So where is your personal information used in your company? And then it gives you a bunch of templates. It gives you operator agreements. It gives you responsible party agreements. It gives you notices for your employees. It gives you policies. It gives you a privacy notice, which can also act as a privacy policy, which you can put on your website. And all of that is live, updated out of the software. So as you change what is going on in your business and you record that in the software, your privacy notice on your website, at any point where you're collecting personal information, is always updated. So it's speaking to a lot of the things that PoPIA requires of us. Remember, PoPIA wants us, when we collect personal information, you must display certain things to be open in when you're getting consent for that personal information. Using the software, and you use the privacy notice from the software, you're doing that. Okay, so the software is broken up broadly into this compliance audit section. So that's the task-based engine of the software. Then it's this governance section. So that's where we capture what personal information do I have. So who are my data subjects? What's my processing purpose around my data subjects? So for employees, I need to pay them. I need to submit tax returns. I need to have employee contracts. I need to do medical aid. I need to do pension. Those are processing purposes. In terms of customers, it could be that I need to do credit applications. I need to load their information into my accounting system. Those are processing purposes. If you go further still, suppliers, I need to load them on my database of registered suppliers. I need to pay them. So those are all processing purposes. So who are my data subjects? What are my processing purposes? Then what's my lawful basis within that processing purpose? So why am I allowed to collect personal information? And then what personal information am I collecting? Where is that kept? And where is it collected? So all of these questions the Act asks us to answer, and the software lets you answer it. So that's under the data mapping. Then from all of this data mapping that you've now collected, then your policies and your notices are developed. That sits in the governance section. And then a great thing about the software is stakeholder communication. So you can actually go and distribute these policies, and you can drive accountability within your organization and through your operators. So your stakeholder communication, you can list your operators that are dealing with PI for you, the courier company or your payroll processing company or your IT company. Those are all operators, as well as all your staff. Use the stakeholder communication module. You send out the policy or notice to them. They've got to open it up and say, I've read and understood this policy. And then you have proof that it's been given to them, that they've read and understood it. So you're driving accountability, and you can prove accountability through the software. Then we can capture all of our operators and responsible parties that we're dealing with. So the operators are those courier companies, payroll firms, IT companies that we're dealing with. Information sharing is our pension funds, government agencies, medical aid, other responsible parties. And then the very difficult thing to achieve without paying an arm and a leg is a process management tool that sits inside your website. So from the software, there's a piece of code, you copy and paste, put it on your website, and then you are able to handle data subject access requests out of the box. And you're also able to handle breach management and report to the regulator whenever there's a breach, exactly what the regulator needs to know. And you can provide the data subjects who've been affected with a letter advising them of what has happened. And then another complicated thing that everybody seems to forget about is a record of processing. So in terms of the Promotion of Access to Information Act, PoPIA, you need to have a notice like this that you give to the regulator to say, where are you using personal information? What are you using it for? What personal information are you using? So all of this has come out by virtue of populating the software. You get this report, you can download it as a PDF, and then you can email it off to the regulator in terms of section 1 of PoPIA. If I just open that up, and you can see there it's now created a PDF. Okay, so let's just quickly dive into this software. Maybe again, we just pause. Is Does anyone have any questions at this stage? Has something come up that you thought, ooh, you know, do I have to do this thing in my business to be compliant? Again, if you want to add it in the comments, you're more than welcome to add in the comments. Let me just say a chat here. Hi, everyone. You can post here. So just watch on your screens. There will be a pop-up at the bottom of your screen, and that's where the chat is if you want to add anything into the chat. All right. So compliance audit. Quickly jump into this. So what it does is it now shows you in each section of PoPIA, that's these first 5, not this one here. This is now an example of a custom area I've added into this application. So you can go click add new, you can give it a description and add subsections and manage tasks and have a little pie chart to show you, are my tasks completed or are they not completed? So you can go and add your own custom sections for other compliance things you'd need to manage in your business. So if we go look at the information officer pie chart here, just try and visually remember this pie chart. It's 22, 33, 44. Now if we go do something, then we will see that pie chart change. So these are now all of our tasks. You can see we can assign a task to a person, and we can make a due date, and we can set it to be reviewed on a certain basis. So now I can have all of my staff loaded here, and I can assign each of these tasks to them. Or just thinking if it was custom tasks, like do the monthly payroll, do the annual financial statements, I can go assign those tasks to people. In terms of compliance, we've got a list of the things that the compliance officer needs to comply with, all listed here and indicating is it not started, in progress, or completed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change. This one is in progress. I'm now going to make it completed. This one I'm also going to make completed. And if we go back to our little pie charts, you see now the pie chart has changed. Okay, we've got a question from Lorette. For a tiny business like mine, there's 3 employees, the software is useful, but could be costly. What alternatives do you suggest? So, Lorette, I suppose it depends what your view of costly is. The software is pretty cost effective. You can pay for it on a monthly basis. Like you have your Office 365 license. If you've got Microsoft Office 365, or you pay email for Gmail maybe on a monthly basis, you can also pay for the software on a monthly basis. So maybe we can have a session and just go through the pricing with you and see if it works for you. Otherwise, it becomes a bit more difficult when you are that small of a business to be properly compliant. Essentially, you need to have policies in place, and you need to have your documents, your processes documented, so that you can show this is where personal information has been dealt with, and then your policy should speak to the risks that you've identified in your processes. That's sort of like a minimum viable product. Okay, but yeah, the problem is you're then not necessarily going to know all of these things that you need to be compliant with. So our information officer will ensure that where relevant, a manual is developed, monitored, maintained, and made available as described in sections 14 and 51 of the Promotion to Access of Information Act. Yeah, so that's possibly a difficult thing to deal with without a software system that helps you. Okay, thanks, Lorette. Oh, sorry, that's Michelle. We have very cost-effective options. Okay, then, yeah, so that's basically how these pie charts work. If we look at data subject consent, you then see there's tasks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those are your tasks. And then there's a status with each task, and I can go assign that task to a person. So very nice way of then seeing within each section, I've got tasks, are those tasks done or are they not done? And I can then go add my own little section, like we added this ISO 9001. We've added 2 subsections to it. We could edit that and add more subsections. So these subsections are basically these pie charts that you see behind. And if we go into that, we then go and add our own risks. So we can go click add. And so this is a task rather, task 2. Obviously put a nice description around what it is. Save, and there's task 2. And I want to add another one, and then I can add task 3. So you can use this for other things in your business, other than just PoPIA, if there are other compliance areas.
Vincent, quick question. In terms of the information officer, our MD or CEO is in another country. Would the HR manager be selected as the IO in this case?
It depends on your organization structure. If the HR is the most senior person in the country and the company is registered externally, so it's not a South African registered company, then the most senior person in the country should definitely take up those duties. But the information officer remains the most senior person in the company. So it is a bit more difficult if it's a non-South African company trading in South Africa. Most often, there is a South African registered company as well. And that South African registered company has a director, which may be an overseas person. And that director is then the information officer. So we need to look at that in a little bit more detail to advise properly on that. So it's got a lot to do with the group structure. Okay, so that was the compliance audit. There's now, obviously, out of this, there's reports. Maybe have a quick look at a dashboard here, and you can see that the dashboard shows you lots of little graphs and bells and whistles about what's going on. Red is bad, green is good. So you can see whether things are bad or good. So there are reports on everything that is happening in the software. In terms of the data mapping, remember what I said, we always need to show who our data subjects are, what is our purpose for processing their information, what personal information of these do we have, where do we keep it, and where do we collect it from. Now, this software allows you to capture that in detail. So here we capture who our data subjects are. So you can see it has a list of data subjects, and you can go add your own data subjects. So you can customize this to your business requirements. Then we've got, within each data subject, we've got all of our processing purposes. Within our processing purposes, we then have the personal information that we're collecting. I'm going into a lot of detail here. Ultimately, what I want to show you is that you can capture processing locations. So where am I storing this information? Operators, who am I asking to deal with it on my behalf? And responsible parties, what other responsible parties like Health and Wellness Service, Mediwell, the Tourism Board, do I have to share this information with? And then the nice thing, it gets visualized for you. So here we can see that we have customers and clients. If we open up our customers and clients, these are our processing purposes. And if I hover on any one, I can see our lawful basis. So we've got section 11, to conclude or perform a contract to which the data subject is a party. So we've got our lawful basis for that processing purpose captured on every single one of them. Within that processing purpose, what is the personal information that I'm keeping? So I've got email addresses, bank details, and ID numbers. And where do I keep it? I keep it in the Galaxy reservation system. So at a glance, you can see exactly where your personal information is being kept, what personal information and where is it kept for every data subject that you have in your organization. So when it comes to responding to an access request, someone says, I'm your customer, what personal information of mine do you have? That's very easy now. You're a customer? Okay, customer. Personal information, right? Personal information, we're keeping that personal information of you. Where are we keeping it? We're keeping it in the Galaxy reservation system. That's for accommodation services. For adventure trails, we also keep it in the Galaxy. Let's minimize that one. We keep your ID number, that's where, and so on and so forth. So you can easily, at a glance, say, where am I keeping what personal information am I keeping and where am I keeping it? Okay, let's quickly have a look at the governance section just to show you the templates that this comes with. So we've got the PoPIA manual, we've got the privacy notice. So if we look at that, so it gives you this privacy notice. Once you publish this, you copy a piece of code and you put it on your website. As the software changes, your website's updated, and anywhere else you've gone and put this piece of code. So if you put a link to this privacy notice on your emails, it's there. If you put it on your application forms, wherever you're obtaining personal information, it's there. So this basically spells out tour guides, that's our processing purposes, that's our lawful basis, that's our retention period. For patrons, that's it. For customers, that's what it is. For employees, that's what it is. For what personal information? That's the personal information we keep. Where do we use it? This is where we use it. Is it in South Africa or outside of South Africa? All of that information is then stored within the software. So you can easily tell the regulator, you can easily deal with data subject access requests. It even produces something for your employees. So what of my employee information am I keeping? And then you can go and utilize some of the policies. So it gives you a program announcement. So that's for your awareness that you need to do. It gives you an information protection policy, the CCTV policy if you have CCTV. It gives you some more data awareness training. So you've got two, there's an initial announcement and there's a training manual. You've got a notification that you can give to staff on best practices. That's in terms of securing your data. Remember, that was the 7th condition, is you need to secure the personal information you're keeping. So this teaches your employees how to secure information. What about trans-border flows? Here's a policy on how you deal with security compromises if you use this, and a policy on data subject access requests. So here's all your policies done. Got it. There it is. Then you can optionally, this is more employee training, sorry, in the document library, you can go add all of your own stuff. So if you do have your own policies, add documents, you can go and add them in here as well. And then just to note, with all of this, so if I go open up this personal information protection privacy policy, you can say use my own content, and it copies the policy in here for you, and you can now go and edit it as you wish. So you can further customize the software to your own needs, the policies that it produces. So all of them work that way. All of those policies, employee privacy notice, we can say use my own content, and it copies it across, and I can then go edit this to my heart's content. Okay, and then just quickly, the data subject access requests. Automatically from your website, when the form's filled in, it pops into received. You get an email to let you know data subject access request has come in. You can then go deal with that data subject access request and be completely compliant. Every single letter out of the act that applies to the data subject access request is shown here. So step by step, I can see if records cannot be found, what do I do? Let's go read. What does the Act say? This is what the Act says. If the request is for confirmation only, what does the Act say about that? This is what the Act says. If I want to charge a fee, am I allowed to charge a fee? What does the Act say? And so you go through records are found. What if I find health records? What must I do if I find health records? Well, here's what the Act says about health records and criminal or civil proceedings. So everything, if I want to refuse, on what basis can I refuse? Here's the basis on which I can refuse. So it's all there, step by step. You can deal with the data subject access request. And then at any point in time, if you need to go look at the data mapping, if I'm dealing with a customer here, where is the person information stored? For accommodation services, it's in the Galaxy reservation system, and that's what's kept there. For city tours, it is that information, and it is kept by tour guides. If it is wine tours, it's that information, and it's also kept by tour guides. So I can, as I'm dealing with the data subject access request, see where the information is being kept and access it easily. And at the end, it gives you all the reporting that you need to report to the regulator. And if you've got an incident breach, it also lets you in a step-by-step process. There's 9 steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 9. There's 9 steps to deal with a breach. And then at the end of it, it gives you the letter that you must give to the regulator. It gives you the letter to go to the data subjects, and it gives you an overview of the incident as you mapped it and described it. So yes, to the regulator at 27 Stemmons Road, Braamfontein, this is the information that the regulator is going to get. Okay, so nice software system, cost effective. It's really very cost effective, and it's going to help you become compliant. Comes with free policies, and so much. If you were to go buy these things, you'd be looking at a pretty penny, probably over 10,000 Rand, to have all the policies that the software is providing you, drafted by lawyers. So that's the end of our presentation. Thanks for your question, Laurette and Taz. Does anyone else have questions with 1 minute to go? And maybe I can ask that, could you maybe just give an indication of how you felt this went? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Was it informative? I think that's ultimately what we want to know is, if you attended this webinar, do you know what to do next or not? So if you could post in the comments, do you know what to do next? How do you feel? Thanks, Laurette. And we'd be happy to help you get your ducks in a row. Be glad to speak to you. Thanks, Jasmine. Thank you, Taz. And as I indicated, I will send out a post-webinar survey with a link to download the PowerPoint that we went through. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Vincent.
Thank you, Tanya.
Can you stay online?
Sure. I'm going to stop the recording.